moments in life when everything on the outside looks fine, but inside there's noise, questions, a quiet sense that something is shifting, even if we can't name it yet. Career changes, life transition, identity shifts, they don't always arrive loudly. Sometimes they show up as restlessness. Today, we are slowing down to listen to that inner signal. Welcome to Inner Peace, Better Health, where we explore the deep connection between emotional balance, clarity, and overall well being. I am your host Nazish, and today I am joined by Debbie Longo, a transformational coach who helps individuals navigate change by addressing the internal patterns that shape external outcomes. We are talking about inner clarity during career and life transitions and how to move forward with intention rather than pressure. So, welcome to the show, Debbie.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
You're very welcome. So, Debbie, when people come to you during times of transition, I am curious, what are they usually feeling before they can even put words towards changing?
Um, Usually, they feel a lot of different things, obviously, but to me, fear is a big one, and they're trying to control. So when I'm afraid, I'm usually afraid of pretty much anything. I don't pick and choose what I'm afraid of, right? It's not that I'm afraid of some things and some things I'm not, right? It just doesn't work that way, even if I tell myself it does. But these things, whatever they are, fear, control, ego, denial, dishonesty, whatever they are, right, and that they're feeling, then that's coming from somewhere, right? And I need to find out where that's coming from. And that's deeper than just telling me, what it actually is. So there's a lot of things, but I would say those things are like the most important, the most common.
Wonderful. That makes so much sense. And that quiet discomfort is something that is almost like body and mind notice the shift before the intellect can catch up. So there's often
Yeah.
this belief that clarity should come before change, that we need to have everything figured out first. Where do you see that idea creating unnecessary pressure?
Um, well, clarity becomes before change because I need to notice that want to change and become willing to actually do it, right? Now, the issue with that is if that's a process and that could take a very long time. And if I'm not open and willing to for that, then I'll just continue with what I'm doing, maybe expecting different results, doing the same thing over and over, or I want to change and I don't know how to. Okay. So there's a few different things. Uh if I can do these things, right? Become willing and everything, then I'm ready to do it. But now I have to take the action. So that's another whole process. So it's not as simple as, I want to do it. Sometimes it is because they've already been through this process, but a lot of times it's not, and this is where the issue comes. And this is why this work is so important to have somebody that has experience in doing this, because if I get somebody that doesn't have any experience at all, they might miss these, signs and ways of helping people in order to get to uh, what it is that they need to get to, the core of the problem, and exactly how they're going to do that without having the person run in the other direction in 2 seconds.
Okay. So, thank you so much for sharing that with us. That adds so much depth to the things that I've asked for our listeners. And let's just stay with that. Like, beneath the confusion people feel during transition, what inner pattern or habit tends to create the most noise?
Well, thank you for the question. I appreciate that was a good question. Um, if I take a habit, let's say for example, right? And, I'm trying to control people and I think that people should do what I want. All right. And that is an example of a habit. Another example is I wake up in the morning and I brush my teeth. I get dressed. Okay. So there's all different examples of what habits are. Now, if I don't like the way that I brush my teeth and I get dressed in the morning or whenever that is, then I want to change that. Right. And if I like the way I'm controlling people, and I think there's nothing wrong with that, even though everybody else around me is upset, then I'm not going to change that. Okay, so what I think might be correct or might be the right thing to change might not necessarily be that way, right? So that's going to depend on what me. It's going to depend on what I'm doing, right? What I'm feeling. Okay. And nobody can tell me what these things are, right? Now, to recognize these still that's one way, right? To recognize these things and change them, right? And then another way would be to ask other people, all right? How am I acting? Does that bother you, these things that I say and do? Because a lot of times people will know before me, right? And sometimes it's obvious because they lash out on you right away the minute you say something, right? But sometimes it's not, okay? So there are a few different things here, but we want to be as transparent and honest as we can with ourselves and other people, and that's a good way of, you know, reducing our negativity and trying to create a better life for ourselves.
It is so powerful to see how much of the struggle isn't about the decision itself, but about the relationship we have with the uncertainty. So, how does this lack of inner clarity show up day to day, emotionally, physically, or even in how people relate to others?
Right. So thank you for the question. So we just talked about that a little bit, right? But the thing is that I want everybody perceives things differently. Okay. And what my perception is different than yours. So if I say that my shirt is green, and if somebody says to me, your shirt is blue, and then I say, no, it's not, it's green. Okay. There's no wrong or right in that. Okay. And what I wanna do is, for me, first as a coach, I wanna ask them, what are their goals? What type of life do they want? Are they happy with their life now? Do they wanna change it? If so, how? Do they know how? Can they identify it? Different things like that, right? And if I ask people, that's a good way, right? But, um, if if they see something and I don't see it, right? Then I have to take, and this is even if I'm working with even if they have a daughter or, a family member or whatever. If they see something and I don't see it, right? Then or vice versa, right? I might want to be able to see if I can see that, if I can see it the way that they're seeing it, perceive it, right? In their way, because if I can't, then it might be okay because I might not see that there's an issue, even though, like I said, everybody around me is not too, it's kind of obvious, but I'm just going to perceive it the way that I want to, and that's really the bottom line. But I don't want it to affect others. That's the whole point to this. And when I change and I get rid of all these behaviors, negativity, all of these things that we're talking about, right? Then I perceive people differently. People do not change. Okay. Maybe they do, but I'm just going to expect that they're not gonna, that that's not up to me to see if they're, it's not up to me to determine whether they're going to change or not, you know. It's up to me to change my attitude, my behavior, my personality, and that will create everything around me to be okay. So I'll see everything completely differently than the way it is now, and that's what perception is.
Absolutely. And I really appreciate how clearly you explain that. That constant internal tension can be exhausting. It quietly drains the energy, even when life looks successful on the surface. So, when someone feels overwhelmed by a transition, what gentle practice or reflections help them reconnect with inner clarity without forcing answers?
Right. So, stuff that we just talked about. And also, there's a lot of things that they can do. I have a lot of suggestions about this. All right. One thing they could do is they could ask other people, like we said, right? But they could ask themselves, okay, in different ways, like we talked about, are the goals. Do you want to make goals? Are you unhappy now? How would you like your life to be? And different things like that. Now, there's a lot of ways to do that, right? They can one of the things I teach is how to listen to your first thought, okay? And they can ask themselves, okay? And also, they could do a meditation. Okay, and this is not where I'm sitting down and I'm, going into a deep thing for 45 minutes. That's not what I'm talking about, all right? I'm talking about they could sit in a room, close their eyes, sit in a chair, whatever, close their eyes, right? And then ask a question, let's say, for example, or tell themselves that they're going to do something positive. Okay, I'm not gonna yell at my father today like I've done every day for the past 25 years, right? Today, I'm not gonna do that, okay? Now, when I do that, I could do that in the morning or during the day, but my suggestion would be to find a quiet place, okay, where there's nobody around, where you could concentrate. Now, you could hear a thought, but also, um, that's telling your brain not to do that. So I want to be able to find a way to control my mind instead of my mind controlling me, right? So if I've been yelling and screaming at my father or a family member or whoever, right? Then I'm telling my mind, we're not going to yell anymore. Now what are we going to do? Now we're going to not yell. Okay. Or now we're going to be peaceful, right? Or now we're going to be nicer, something like that, right? And when I do those things, I'm teaching my mind and it's saying, okay, well, we're not going to do this. Now, instead, we're going to do this. And that's a way of changing from negative to positive. But again, these things are all a process. You could do what I say, you could look online, all right? And they'll tell you the same thing, But if you're not there in the process, you're probably just going to do it once or twice and it's not going to be that effective.
Absolutely. And, thank you so much for sharing that with us. With so much clarity. Like, I love that. So, transitions rarely move in a straight line. When doubt resurfaces or old patterns creep back in, what helps people stay grounded and continue forward?
Thank you for the question. That's a good question. Um, I think that people should focus more on being positive and seeing what is around them that they don't like that bothers them, okay? And they can remove themselves from the situation. So if I am sitting next to somebody at work that is very loud and is very, like, has high energy, okay? And when she talks, I get, like, a headache, and I'm just not that type of person. I don't have that personality, right? I could ask my boss if I could move my seat, okay, to somebody else who's a little bit more calm, right? And that takes courage and it takes, self-esteem, right, to do these things. Because I don't want to think that, if I ask him, he might fire me, or he might say no, So that's why, all these things are a process. But that's the first thing that I want to do because when I change, it comes from the inner and, all these different things that we're talking about, right? But I wanna make sure and it will be different. So the person that you see that is very loud at work or whatever the situation is, right? When I change, that person's no longer loud. That's really what we're trying to get to, right? But if I'm not there yet, right, then I want to, try to do things, where I could change my environment. I work with people that have left their family. Okay, their family was driving them insane, and they left their entire family. They just left, and they just got an apartment, because they couldn't be around them, and that is helping them to grow and change because you're changing, you're working, doing things, and then you go back. Then you enter into a situation where everybody's yelling or whatever, and all those things that you just worked on are now gone because now you're entering into the situation where you're trying to get rid of all these things. And that's so these are all things that I have a million stories like this. These are all things that we can, just be aware of, and just a matter of am I willing to even do these types of things?
That is going to help a lot of listeners feel less alone in what they are experiencing. This is the kind of guidance that can make a real difference in someone's life right now. So, thank you so much for that. And for anyone listening who feels stuck between what was and what's next, I'll ask you this. What part of you is asking to be listened to more closely right now? Inner clarity isn't about certainty, it is about creating enough inner quiet to hear what truly matters. Debbie, for listeners who want to learn more about your work or connect with you, where can they find you?
Yeah, thank you. I have a website, Life in Bloom NY for New York.com. LifeinBloomNY. It's .net actually. And I'm on LinkedIn. You could just type in my name, Debbie Longo, and all of the information will be there, and there's like I have my phone number. There's like 4 or 5 ways to contact me on the website. So it's pretty easy. I'm pretty accessible.
Amazing. I will make sure to include all these details into the show notes so that many people can connect with you and learn more about your work. And thank you so much for spending time with us on Inner Peace Better Health. And if today's conversation resonated, take a moment to breathe, reflect, and trust that clarity unfolds when we stop rushing it. Until next time, stay gentle with yourself and your journey.